So friends with benefits is a thing. The movie, not the concept. I'm sure you're probably aware that people like to casually hook up. You may not remember this movie because it wasn't really all that spectacular or memorable. Although it mixes up the formula a bit more than your average romantic comedy, it's still pretty run-of-the-mill. It weirdly even tries to call out other romantic comedies for their tropes.
I really have to stop buying into this bullshit Hollywood cliche of true love. Shut up, Katherine Heigl, you stupid liar!
But then winds up falling into those same tropes anyway.
That is so lame.
Oh, I know. Some Prince Charming shit though, right?
And I get it, the point of a romantic comedy is to hit these beats for the purposes of emotional catharsis, and the only way to be a good version of this kind of movie is to try and do that in ways that are not tired or repetitive. And this movie is at least entertaining in that way. I've talked about rom-coms before in an episode on The Princess Bride, and I stand by that video and how genreification works, but in writing that script I found a new appreciation for romantic comedies. Don't get me wrong, a lot of them are still not great and highly problematic, but some are pretty good and have their place, and I can appreciate that. I saw Friends with Benefits a few years back, and usually I would place it into context, but I don't actually remember the circumstances under which I watched it. I know it wasn't in theaters, and I remember enjoying the film at the time because it was funny, and it did try some bigger emotional side plots than your average romantic comedy would, and I liked it for those things, but it's not even close to my favorite rom-com. That would probably be a toss-up between The F Word, which is also called What If for some reason, and Ruby Sparks, which is barely a romantic comedy because of the fantastical premise and the frighteningly existential implications therein, but if WALL-E is a rom-com, then so is Ruby Sparks. So why choose Friends with Benefits if it's not the best romantic comedy? Wouldn't any of my favorites be smarter choices? Well, actually, despite Friends with Benefits not being the best romantic comedy, it is actually pretty smart in how it depicts sexual contracts. The premise of the movie is an age-old question. Can you have sex with a partner without getting romantically involved?
That's not possible.
Right, and there are emotional reasons why, but what I'm more interested in are the ethics of a sexual contract. Because Friends with Benefits actually depicts an interesting dynamic between partners in how they are treated in terms of sexual gratification, autonomy, and objectification. And all of this is through the lens of some really interesting feminist discourse, because even though this movie is a bit cliche, it's actually a great example of Kantian ethics. Yes, really. And so today, I want to talk about Friends with Benefits. The movie was written by Will Gluck, who had just finished the ridiculously smart Easy A, which constantly surprises me every time I watch it. Gluck was interested in working with Justin Timberlake and Mila Kunis, for whom the roles were apparently written for. The three of them spent time working through the script in order to make sure that the characters felt real and that the humor worked. Production began in 2010 with Gluck as director and producer, and it was released the following summer. The film also boasted a bunch of big-name secondary actors like Woody Harrelson, Emma Stone, and Andy Samberg. Although the film takes jabs at the rom-com formula,
You know, why don't they ever make a movie about what happens after the big kiss?
They do. It's called porn.
the characters and events don't stray that far from those beats, and as a result, the film was received fairly well by audiences and critics as a decently written rom-com. Timberlake and Kunis were both celebrated, and the depiction of sex in a realistic and humorous way was quite refreshing. You're probably familiar with the premise of the movie, but in case you really want to watch this one before I dissect it, here's your spoiler warning. The film follows Adam Franklin and Emma Kurtzman, who happen to have crushes on each other, and meet at camp and then again in college and once again as adults. When Adam finds out that his father is in a relationship with his ex-girlfriend, he gets super drunk and calls every girl on his phone and winds up passed out on Emma's couch. When he wakes up hungover, the two of them talk and wind up having sex to get— wait a second. No strings attached? These were two different movies? But they came out in the same year! Apparently, while Mila Kunis was out getting fake sexed up with Justin Timberlake, her future husband Ashton Kutcher decided to punk them and make the same movie but with Natalie Portman. No Strings Attached is the same premise and formula, but with slightly different circumstances. This works out really well. That gives me twice as much material to work with to prove my points. So, all that garbage about sexual gratification, autonomy, objectification, and Kantian ethics that I said before, but again now, and both movies. And so today, I want to talk about Friends with Benefits and No Strings Attached. Rumor has it that No Strings Attached was going to be called Friends with Benefits, and the two studios were in a bit of a thing over the name. But then Paramount chose to change the name of their project to No Strings Attached. The film was written by New Girl writer and creator Elizabeth Merriweather. It was released in January of 2011, just 6 months before Friends with Benefits. This movie, like Friends with Benefits, was not an overwhelming hit and adheres to the rom-com formula even more stringently than its competitor. But it still has some funny parts and great supporting cast members like Cary Elwes, Kevin Kline, and Mindy Kaling, and of course Natalie Portman does an excellent job, as always. And if there's anyone out there who made these movies and is complaining that I'm now comparing them, tough shit. Learn to make more unique movies. Okay, let's try this again. Spoiler warning, but for No Strings Attached and then Friends with Benefits. After discovering that his father is seeing his ex-girlfriend, Adam, a TV show set assistant, gets drunk and calls every girl on his phone in a desperate bid for intimacy. He wakes up the next morning naked on the couch of his longtime acquaintance Emma and her roommates. After apologizing for his drunken and subsequent hungover behavior, the two of them talk and wind up having sex before Emma has to leave for her residency. Adam has long harbored a crush on Emma and tries to approach this situation carefully, but with his intentions known. But Emma is not receptive. She doesn't want the complications of a relationship, and so Adam agrees to a deal in which they see each other for sex. The two of them slowly get insight into the other's lives and become closer.
How long have you two been together?
Oh, we're not.
We're sex friends.
Yeah. Yes, we are.
You're friends with benefits?
Oh, he fucking said it, not me. Adam tries to get some of his writing scenes so he can get out from his father's shadow, both romantically and career-wise, and Emma is troubled by her mother's grief at her father's death and her sister's impending wedding. When Adam gets Emma to agree to a regular date and shows his true feelings, she rebukes him, and they stop seeing each other. Heartbroken, Adam tries to move on, and after an episode he wrote is successfully filmed, he's hired as a full-time writer. At her sister's wedding, Emma is heartbroken and can't stop thinking about Adam, so she goes to his place only to find him with another woman. But when Adam's father winds up in the hospital, Emma goes to find him there, and the two make up. Friends with Benefits opens with this really clever phone call fake-out where Jamie and Dylan break up with their respective partners and are called emotionally damaged and unavailable. Jamie, who works as a headhunter, recruits Dylan for GQ magazine and he moves to New York. Because he's new in town, Jamie shows Dylan around the city and the two of them become friends. One night while hanging out together, the pair reveal that they both wish sex could happen without the need for emotions to get in the way and agree to casual sex while still hanging out. After some time, Jamie thinks she wants to start dating again, so the two go back to being platonic. Jamie meets a doctor and they go on a few dates, but once they sleep together, he shows he's no longer interested. Dylan sees that Jamie is heartbroken and invites her to go back to LA with him to see his family. She agrees, and Dylan introduces Jamie to his sister, nephew, and father who suffers from Alzheimer's disease. When it becomes clear that Jamie and Dylan are attracted to each other, Dylan runs his mouth off, saying Jamie is emotionally damaged. Unfortunately, Jamie overhears and decides to return to New York. Back in the city, Dylan confronts Jamie. She admits she overheard him and that their emotions have clearly become wrapped up in what was supposed to be simple sex. When Jamie finds out that Dylan took an interview with another company and didn't tell her, she's furious with him, but he reminds her that she made it very clear they were no longer friends. Sometime later, Dylan's father comes to spend time with him in New York and tells Dylan that because he's losing his memory, the good memories are that much more important to hold on to, and that he should go after Jamie if there's even a remote possibility there's a chance for love. And so with a few favors, Dylan organizes a flash mob to perform in order to make Jamie's world feel more like her favorite romantic comedy movie, and the two make up. Both movies are cheesy as fuck. These movies are built around the central conceit of characters agreeing to have sex with each other and the predictable emotional fallout therein in accordance with the rom-com formula. But like the characters, I'm not interested in the emotionality.
Okay, you're beautiful. You have nothing to be insecure about.
You see, that is way too emotionally supportive, and you need to just lock that down.
Actually, I'm not really interested in the intimacy either in this case. What I'm most fascinated by is the contract itself. Now, when I use the term contract, I don't mean a specific document. A contract can refer to any group of people or parties agreeing to certain rules or parameters, and the general outline and repercussions of those rules. We can see in both movies when the characters create and outline these contracts.
You swear you don't want anything more from me other than sex?
You swear you don't want anything more from me?
We probably shouldn't snuggle.
Yeah. That just felt wrong.
And because all parties involved are consenting adults, there isn't any issue here. Unless your name is Immanuel Kant.
Kant.
Kant!
Kant has some strange thoughts in regards to sexual relationships. He also has different views based on whether or not a couple is married, but I actually think that marriage contracts are more problematic than casual contracts because the only thing a marriage contract outlines in regards to sex is monogamy, so in many ways it's actually less effective. Kant is famous for postulating the idea of the categorical imperative. That is, that a person should be free to do whatever they want unhindered by the wants or needs of others, as long as those things don't negatively affect another person's wants and needs in turn. In simpler terms, we should not treat other people as a means to an end. They're not tools to be used, but individuals with their own needs. This is called autonomy. So when you lie, cheat, or steal, you're impeding another person's autonomy with your actions, and that's a no-no. You have used a person as a means to an end, rather than as an end in themselves. So great. Can we get back to the part where this is about boning? Kant argues that when a person agrees to have sex with another, even consensually, they're actually reducing themselves to being used as a means to an end. In this case, the end is sexual gratification for another person, and in doing so, you've given up your own autonomy.
Use each other for sex at all hours of the day and night. Nothing else.
Kant finds this problematic. All humans, and really all beings, should have their autonomy respected, and especially by themselves. And so many philosophers try to move forward with these ideas and see if they can come up with an answer. But in the process of giving oneself over to the desires of another person, the individual allows themselves to be used as an object of desire. And just as that phrase implies, they are objectified. Objectification is probably something you've heard before, especially regarding women and the male gaze. I did an entire episode of This Is a Thing on how Jessica Rabbit is viewed as an object of desire and the male gaze in cinema, and you should definitely check that one out. But in simple terms, objectification is when an autonomous person is reduced to something that is viewed as an object. Or in Kantian terms, a person is used as a means to an end. When Jamie, Dylan, Emma, or Adam let their partner see them this way, they're allowing themselves to be denied autonomy, which can be hugely problematic. Sex is one way that people are often objectified, but it isn't the only way, as anytime a person is viewed as a means to an end, they're objectified. For example, when Jamie confronts Dylan about taking a meeting with another company because she will lose her bonus, he becomes upset because it appears that Jamie is using him as a tool to get her money. This has nothing to do with him being a visual object of desire, but he is reduced to just a means of her getting a bonus, and therefore is objectified. Objectification is a bit problematic because it's such a broad term, but this dope-ass feminist philosopher named Martha Nussbaum broke down the term in a way that explains specifically how people are being objectified. She also uses literature for her examples, and that's awesome. Using pop culture references to teach philosophy is my jam. Way to go, Martha! Nussbaum separates objectification into 7 distinct instances, but it's easy to see how each one of them detracts from a person's autonomy, and I'm gonna do my best to show examples of these on screen. So a person is objectified when they are used instrumentally or that they are treated as a means to an end, like a tool. When a person is denied autonomy, they are treated as though they are lacking in self-determination. When a person is treated as inert or lacking in agency or activity. When a person is fungible, or that they are interchangeable with other people or objects. When a person is violable, or not given boundaries and therefore able to be broken into or destroyed. When a person is owned and therefore can be bought and sold. Or when a person has their subjectivity denied, or their thoughts, feelings, and experiences are invalidated or dismissed. In all of these cases, a person has been objectified, and none of them are particularly nice things to do to someone, but there are some that are more problematic than others. In No Strings Attached and Friends with Benefits, not all of these instances come up. The only way that the characters are objectified in either movie is instrumentally as objects of desire. In fact, the characters in the movies are often seen treating each other with great respect in other ways. For instance, when Adam expresses his emotions for Emma, she denies them, as in she does not reciprocate, but she doesn't dismiss them, although Adam may have actually objectified himself when he entered into the contract and denied his own feelings. But never are the characters fungible or violable, unless you count Jamie getting sawed in half.
Forgot my saw. I'll be right back.
In fact, the main characters in both movies are shown to have an increased sense of each other's autonomy when they're not using each other instrumentally for sex. Their concern for each other actually makes them more sensitive to when others objectify their partner. When Jamie is treated poorly by the doctor, she is objectified instrumentally, subjectively, and as an autonomous person. She was not aware she was being used for sex, and her feelings and actions were neglected when he decided he was no longer interested. Dick move. But Dylan is aware of how she was hurt, and possibly hyper-aware, and that might be because of their sexual contract. Nussbaum even says that despite objectification being problematic, sexual objectification in certain moments does seem to increase the respect towards another person in regards to other kinds of objectification. She actually uses the example of Lady Chatterley's lover for this, but both of the movies I picked are also good examples. Even though this selective objectification seems to decrease objectification at other times, often towards other more problematic types of objectification, there's still the problem of treating yourself or another person as a means to an end, even if the characters are only doing it instrumentally. Another philosopher by the name of Leslie Green has one possible way around this issue of objectification by taking a more nuanced approach to Kantian ethics. And it's pretty smart, and that's not just because he's Canadian. It comes from the act of giving consent, but it isn't consent itself. In the contract, Emma gives Adam express consent to use her instrumentally in exchange for permission to use him instrumentally. This reciprocation would seem to make the contract okay because both have given up their autonomy in one aspect for the right to view another as an object in the same regard. There could still be issues around how a person might conflate one instance of objectification with another, and just because they've given their partner permission to view them this way, doesn't necessarily mean that it's morally okay. At least not according to Kant.
Kant.
But Green thinks that this is more than okay because what Emma has given isn't permission to be used instrumentally in all instances, only in regards to sex. It's the same in Friends with Benefits. Jamie and Dylan are friends first and then have sex, and after some initial awkwardness, they use each other, but only for sex. They still treat each other as autonomous beings outside of their sexual exploits, and when Jamie expresses the desire to date again, immediately their relationship returns to a platonic friendship. This is because there is a contextual component to the contract. Green says that this is fine because the characters are using each other as a means to an end, but not only as a means to an end. During sex, these characters agree to be objectified, but not in an absolute sense. They haven't reduced themselves to being fungible or emotionally dismissed or violable. Although, if you're into more exotic play, then you might be down for different instances of objectification, and that's cool too, but the point is that your partner doesn't see you as only a means to an end. Even during sex, the characters in these two movies never see each other as only a means to an end, but that they can be both used and autonomously valued at the same time. There's also the fact that being an object of desire has its own kind of gratification, and it's one part of what makes up scopophilia. Now, it's worth noting that Nussbaum doesn't agree with Green about how to circumvent this problem, but she isn't super clear on any other solutions, and this one makes a lot of sense to me, so we're going with it. Both movies do a pretty great job of showing how consensual sex-based contracts are about objectification, but can still be ethical, right up until feelings get in the way. No Strings Attached and Friends with Benefits might be incredibly formulaic, so much so that they're almost identical in terms of story beats. But they do an excellent job of depicting how casually hooking up to get your rocks off is a kind of contract in which both parties are consenting to being objectified in specific ways without totally denying their own or each other's autonomy. And of course, romance and situational comedy and all that other stuff. But the emotional fallout where one or both parties become hurt because of their feelings getting in the way might have more to do with objectification than we think. Kant is right in that to deny your autonomy is a bad thing, but when you agree to a contract about sex, you may inadvertently devalue your own emotions and objectify yourself. On top of that, in the process of objectifying your partner in one way, you might inadvertently become hypersensitive to how they are objectified by others and therefore develop emotions for them. Or maybe I'm just a hopeless romantic who's waxing poetic about Kantian ethics.
Kant.
But I still think that both movies provide interesting examples of attempts at explicit sexual contracts and inadvertently explore the exploitation of one's own and another person's autonomy in regards to different kinds of objectification. A single instance of denying someone autonomy for the purposes of sexual gratification doesn't mean that you only view that person as an object. And these movies show us that in fact the opposite might be true. And that is why Friends with Benefits and No Strings Attached are actually about Kantian ethics. But also sex. Here are my stray thoughts. Despite being very close in story beats, I do think that Friends with Benefits is a more thoughtful movie, and how they play with the rom-com and fairy tale tropes was interesting even though they could have done more with it. I also think the subplot with Dylan's father having Alzheimer's was profound and should have been more of a focus. On the other hand, Adam works as a set assistant on what is essentially High School Musical, the musical, the show, and I can't be mad at that. Hey! Thanks so much for watching that episode. Let me know if you ever confused No Strings Attached and Friends with Benefits. They're really, really similar. I can't believe that they came out so close to each other. A lot of the research that I did was thanks to Lena Papadaki on the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, and as always, you can check all of the citation on research that I did down below. Be sure to check out our other channel, the Cinemasters, for more conversations about movies. Objectify that like button, that bell, and that subscribe, so you can always catch more awesome episodes of This Is a Thing, the long and the short of it, and whatever else we got going on right here on Cinemasters Ultimate Timeline.